Welcome. Today, we open a quiet chapter from Chronicles of Pharmacy. A chapter where medicine and magic once walked side by side. This episode is meant to be listened to slowly. Late at night, on a long drive, or with your eyes closed. Here, you will hear of amulets and charms, sacred words worn around the neck, diseases believed to move from body to body, and of healers who trusted symbols as much as substances. These are not fairy tales. They were once medicine. Settle in and listen carefully. Good listening. Magic and medicine. Amulets and objects meant to be carried upon the body appear everywhere in the old medical books, condemned by some, approved by others. You can find them discussed by Mizaldus, Porter, Albertus, and many more. A ring made from the hoof of a donkey's right forefoot, worn upon the body, was believed to possess healing power. Peony was said to calm epilepsy. Precious stones were thought to cure many diseases. The dung of a wolf, carried close to the skin, was prescribed for colic. A spider was worn against fever, and so the list continues. Robert Burton, writing in The Anatomy of Melancholy, pauses here to draw a careful line. He does not reject these practices entirely, but he warns us. Those remedies which consist solely of words, characters, spells, and charms must be rejected. For they possess no power except through strong imagination, as Pomponazzi proves, or through the policy of the devil himself, who was their first inventor and teacher. From the very earliest records of healing, charms, enchantments, amulets, incantations, talismans and phylacteries, indeed, the whole armory of witchcraft and magic, have been deeply interwoven with pharmacy and medicine. This union appears in every land and in every age. Even language bears witness to it. The Greek word Pharmakeia once meant simply the art of preparing medicines. Over time, its meaning darkened, descending into sorcery and poisoning. This change reveals how deeply superstition had penetrated even the medical practices of the educated Greeks. Among the earliest figures associated with magic and healing were names that echoed across civilizations. Hermes of Egypt, Zoroaster of Persia, Solomon of Israel. These names themselves became tools of invocation. Those who originally bore them were likely men of wisdom far above the ordinary, and certainly above the crude tricks later attributed to them. Yet it served the interests and the livelihoods of those who profited from popular superstition to claim that their practices descended directly from these revered heroes of a distant and half-forgotten past. Still, it would be unfair to assume that all magical rites connected with healing were based on deliberate deception. Among untutored or early societies, belief in demons as the cause of disease arises naturally, perhaps even reasonably. When a member of a tribe is suddenly seized by an epileptic fit, what explanation seems more immediate than the presence of an unseen enemy? Peter? When plague, smallpox, or fever sweeps through a village, is it not almost inevitable to believe that hostile spirits have descended upon the people, perhaps as punishment for some unknown offense? From such reasoning, sacrifice follows instinctively. In parts of China, for example, if a person accidentally strikes a stone with the foot and soon afterward falls ill, the family will return to that stone and offer fruit, wine, or other gifts. If the patient recovers, the treatment is considered proven. Only those unwilling to believe will question it. And if the patient dies, the conclusion feels no less certain. It merely confirms the power and cruelty of the offended spirit. Among some societies, such as the native peoples of New Zealand, it is believed that each disease has its own demon, one for fever, one for epilepsy, one for toothache, and so on. Within this belief system, the logic is complete. Each spirit has its own preferences, things that may please it, frighten it, or drive it away. From this arise amulets, talismans, and charms, each tailored to a specific unseen force. The North American Indians, by contrast, often attribute all disease to a single malevolent spirit, and so their treatments remain the same for every illness, whatever its outward form. Egyptian, Jewish, and Arabic magic. According to the ancient writer Celsus, the Egyptians believed that the very air around them was alive with invisible beings. They taught that 36 demons or divine forces inhabited the atmosphere, and that each one ruled over a specific organ or part of the human body. When illness struck, it was not seen as random. The priest-physician would carefully identify which demon governed the afflicted organ and would then call upon that spirit by name. Through a precise and formal invocation, the demon was commanded, not begged, to restore the body to health. Across many Eastern cultures, Solomon was believed to possess extraordinary knowledge of healing through magical means. The historian Josephus tells us that Solomon wrote a book revealing secret methods for controlling disease and expelling spirits. This book, according to tradition, was later suppressed by King Hezekiah, who feared it encouraged people to pray to powers other than Jehovah. Yet the knowledge did not disappear entirely. Certain Solomonic secrets survived, passed quietly through oral tradition within select families. Josephus also recounts a remarkable public demonstration. A Jewish man named Eleazar, standing before the Roman Emperor Vespasian and his officers, drew a demon out of a possessed man through his nostrils using a magic ring and spoken words of power. To prove that the demon truly existed as a separate entity, Eleazar commanded it to overturn a vessel of water placed on the floor, and the vessel fell. Books claiming to reveal Solomon's hidden wisdom spread widely, not only among Jews, but among Christians as well. Goethe later alluded to such a text in Faust, writing, "For half-born creatures of hell, Solomon's key serves well." Throughout their long history, the Jewish people both studied and practiced magic as a form of healing. The Book of Enoch tells of the sons of God descending to earth and teaching humanity incantations, exorcisms, and the cutting of roots. Jewish magic was held in high esteem by the Greeks and Romans, while Arab scholars accepted its teachings with little doubt. The Talmud is filled with magical formulas, and the Kabbalah, a mystical system blending Jewish tradition with Alexandrian philosophy, emerged around the 10th century. This system later became the foundation for the speculative medical doctrines of Paracelsus and his followers. During the Middle Ages, and in some places even much later, belief in the occult powers of the Jews was widespread and deeply rooted, a belief that Jews themselves had helped cultivate. Tragically, this belief became both the cause and the excuse for much of their persecution. Punishments for sorcery were not based on disbelief or accusations of fraud, but on the terrifying conviction that such powers were real and dangerously effective. In Western Europe, many ancient medical practices associated with Jewish folk medicine have vanished. In the East, however, particularly in Turkey and Syria, archaic prayers and ancient remedies have survived almost unchanged since the days of the Babylonian captivity. Treatments still include substances such as dogs' livers, earthworms, hare's feet, live ants, human bones, dove's dung, wolves' entrails, and powdered mummy. Wealthier patients might receive rarer prescriptions, such as dew collected from Mount Carmel. Prayers, invocations, and superstitious rituals form the daily work of the Gabbites, usually elderly attendants who care for the sick. Their knowledge includes countless remedies believed to be infallible. Freshly roasted earthworms ground into powder and mixed with wine, or live grasshoppers soaked in water, are given for bile disorders. For bronchial illness, Hebrew letters are written on a new plate, washed off with wine, mixed with 3 citron grains from the Feast of Tabernacles, and swallowed as a potion. Dog's excrement mixed with honey is applied to sore eyes. Powdered mummy or human bones are taken as tonics, while wolf's liver is prescribed for seizures. Yet none of these remedies are believed to work without the proper invocation. These spoken formulas may call upon patriarchs, angels, or prophets, or they may consist of strange, meaningless syllables. For toothache, the traditional chant is simply Adar, Gar, Vadar, Gar. Even today, phylacteries worn by Jews during certain religious services are thought to offer protection against evil forces. These small leather cases, bound to the left arm and forehead in obedience to Mosaic law, contain passages from Exodus and Deuteronomy. To modern readers, these texts seem to oppose superstition, yet rabbis once taught that both phylacteries and the mezuzah on doorposts could guard against physical and spiritual harm. Strict rules governed their preparation. A scribe writing the sacred words was forbidden to stop, even if addressed by a king. Across the East, amulets of every kind have long been trusted to prevent and cure disease. Galen quotes Nitchepsus, an Egyptian king of the 7th century BCE, who claimed that a green jasper carved into the shape of a dragon surrounded by rays could cure indigestion when worn against the body. Among the works attributed to Hermes was one titled The 36 Herbs Sacred to Horoscopes. Galen dismissed it as useless, though later scholars noted that its very title strangely confirms Celsus's account. Amulets remain common throughout the East. In his Medicine of the Arabs, Bertharin describes how an uneducated Arab, when ill, will visit a priest and pay for a small paper inscribed with sacred phrases. This is sealed in leather and worn as close as possible to the diseased part. Wealthier women use silver cases containing verses from the Quran, but the writing must be done on a Friday, shortly before sunset, using ink mixed with myrrh and saffron. In the third report of the Wellcome Research Laboratories at Khartoum, Dr. R.G. Anderson describes the medical superstitions of the people of Kordofan, illustrating charms still in use. To the native, he writes, no process is too absurd for belief, and often no price too high for a cure. Many people wear talismans constantly, spending much of their limited income on charms meant to cure chronic illnesses. The son of the late Mahdi once gave Dr. Anderson a charm worn by his father against evil spirits and the evil eye, a square case containing a written spell and a pouch of prepared roots. Such charms often include repeated verses from the Quran, mixed with symbols of great prophetic figures, especially Solomon. Enoch. The Lone, the writing board. The lone is a wooden board on which sacred phrases are written by holy men. Once the ink dries, it is washed off, and the liquid is either drunk or applied to the body, completing a ritual where writing itself becomes medicine. The abracadabra mystery. Among all ancient charms and talismans employed in medicine, none achieved greater fame than abracadabra. Its mystical meaning has inspired centuries of ingenious speculation, yet even its linguistic origin has never been conclusively agreed upon. The earliest known reference to the word appears in the poem De Medicina Praescripta Saluberrima, by Quintus Serenus Simonicus, a distinguished Roman physician of the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Simonicus enjoyed the favor of the Emperor Septimius Severus and accompanied him on his expedition to Britain in AD 208. Severus died at York in AD 211, and the following year his son, Caracalla, ordered the assassination of his brother Geta, along with some 20,000 others believed to support Geta's claim. Among those executed was Serenus Simonicus himself. The poem, the only surviving work of Serenus, consists of 1,115 hexameter lines and offers a vivid picture of the medical practice and superstitions of its time. The verses in which the charm abracadabra is introduced, together with precise instructions for its use, are as follows. In scribis carte, quod dicitur abracadabra. Sepius. Et subter repetas, sed ditra hasami. Et magis atque magis, desint elementa figuris. Singular, quae semper rapis et cutera figis. Donic, in angestam, redigator litera conum. His lino nexis column, redemia memento. In a scholarly paper on Serenus Simonicus by Dr. Barnes of Carlisle, published in the St. Louis Medical Review, the following translation is offered. The disease in question is a particular form of semi-tertian fever. Write several times on a piece of paper the word abracadabra and repeat the word in the lines below, but remove letters from the complete word, allowing one letter to disappear in each successive line. Continue this process, retaining the remaining letters, until the writing is reduced to a narrow cone. Remember to tie the papers with flax and bind them around the neck. The charm was written in several variations, all conforming strictly to these instructions. After being worn for 9 days, it was to be thrown over the shoulder into a stream flowing eastward. Should the disease resist this talisman, Serenus recommended additional remedies: the application of lion's fat, or yellow coral and green emeralds, tied to the skin of a cat and worn about the neck. Serenus Simonicus is believed to have been a disciple of Basilides, a notorious Christian heretic of the early 2nd century and founder of a Gnostic sect. Basilides incorporated into his doctrines imaginative speculations derived from the teachings of Pythagoras and Apollonius of Tyre, particularly concerning the mystical significance of names and numbers. To him is attributed the invention of the word abraxas, which in Greek numeration represents the total 365. A. 1. 1. B. 2. 2. Negation. 100. A. 1. X. 60. A. 1. S. 200. This number has been interpreted either as a numerical symbol of the Persian sun god, or, if the term was indeed invented by Basilides, as representing the 365 emanations of the infinite deity. It has long been assumed that abracadabra was derived from abraxas. Other interpretations, however, abound. Littre associates the word with the Hebrew terms a, ruach, dabar, Father, Holy Spirit, Word. Dr. King, a leading authority on Gnostic gems, dismisses this explanation as fanciful and suggests instead that abracadabra is a modification of ablathanabla, a phrase frequently inscribed on such gems and interpreted as, Our Father, Thou art our Father. Others reverse this argument, claiming that ablathanabla itself is a corruption of abracadabra. An ingenious contributor to Notes and Queries proposed yet another Hebrew origin, abrai seder brai, meaning out, bad spirit, out. It is generally agreed that the word was properly pronounced abrasadabra. Another compelling suggestion, advanced by Colonel C.R. Conder in The Rise of Man, 1908, derives the term from abracadabra, a Hebrew phrase signifying, "I bless the deed." The triangular arrangement of the charm was almost certainly intentional, symbolizing the Trinity in unity and transforming the written word itself into a visual and spiritual instrument of healing. Greek and Roman magic. Pythagoras taught that simply holding dill in the left hand could prevent epilepsy, a belief that reflects the intimate connection, in Greek thought, between bodily disorder and symbolic action. Serapion of Alexandria, writing around 278 BC, prescribed for epilepsy a striking assortment of animal substances. The warty excrescences found on the forelegs of animals, the brain and gall of a camel, the rennet of a seal, the dung of a crocodile, the blood of a turtle, and numerous other animal products. These remedies, shocking to modern sensibilities, were entirely consistent with a medical worldview in which disease was influenced by hidden forces and sympathetic correspondences. Pliny the Elder records many traditions of a similar nature. He relates that a root of autumnal nettle could cure a tertian fever, provided that, while digging it up, the patient's name and the names of his parents were pronounced aloud. He notes that the longest tooth of a black dog, worn as an amulet, was believed to cure quartan fever. Another remedy prescribed that the snout and the tips of the ears of a mouse, the animal itself then released unharmed, should be wrapped in a rose-colored cloth and worn as an amulet to achieve the same effect. Pliny further mentions the right eye of a living lizard, wrapped in a piece of goat skin, and a herb gathered from the head of a statue, tied with red thread, as additional examples of popular amulets of his time. Yet Pliny does not appear entirely convinced of their efficacy. He records one supposed remedy, that placing the heart of a hen upon a woman's left breast while she sleeps would compel her to reveal all her secrets, and dismisses it bluntly as a monstrous falsehood. Mr. Cockayne, commenting on this passage, remarks with dry irony, "Perhaps he had tried it." Alexander of Tralles, however, shows less skepticism. He recommends numerous amulets, some of which he claims to have tested personally. For colic, he advises the dung of a wolf, containing fragments of bone, sealed in a tube and worn upon the right arm or thigh. For bilious disorders, he prescribes an octagonal iron ring, engraved with the words, "Flee, flee, ho, ho, bile, the lark was searching." For gout, his instructions are elaborate and precise. Henbane must be gathered when the moon stands in Aquarius or Pisces before sunset, using the thumb and third finger of the left hand. While gathering the herb, an invocation must be spoken, inviting the sacred plant to come to the house of a named individual and to cure the sufferer, whether designated as M or Urn. Such prescriptions could be multiplied almost without end. Even language itself was shaped by magical thinking. The Greeks called the Furies by the name Eumenides, meaning the kindly ones, evidently in the hope of appeasing them. For a similar reason, fairies were known to our own ancestors as the good folk. In both cases, the naming of feared powers served not to describe them, but to soften them, a linguistic charm intended to disarm the unseen. A world crowded with cures. It would be both tedious and pointless to recount the countless superstitions that once formed the medical folklore of England and many other lands. Warts, toothache, fever, worms, every common suffering had its remedy, and most people knew several by heart. These cures were not learned in schools, but passed quietly from mouth to mouth, from generation to generation. One of the oldest beliefs held that toothache was caused by tiny worms gnawing inside the teeth, creatures that could be driven out by the smoke of henbane. This idea is ancient and remarkably persistent. An Anglo-Saxon medical text, later translated into modern English, preserves one such method in careful detail. For toothworms, take acorn meal and henbane seed and wax, of all equally much, mingle them together, work into a wax candle and burn it, let it reek into the mouth, put a black cloth under, and the worms will fall on it. Here, healing was not silent. It smoked, it smelled, it demanded to be seen. Words, creatures, and spoken power. A later remedy, recorded by Marcellus, a Latin medical writer whose works were translated into Saxon, required far less preparation. The sufferer was to speak 3 strange words: argidam, margidam, sturdigam. They were to be spoken 3 times. Then the patient would spit into a frog's mouth, release it, and politely request the creature to carry the toothache away. No fire, no herbs, only words, breath, and a living messenger. Pain, it seems, could be transferred, if asked correctly. Sacred stories as medicine. Another cure for toothache required neither smoke nor animal, but faith written on skin. A piece of parchment was worn, inscribed with a sacred charm, a short story meant to heal through remembrance. As St. Peter sat at the gate of Jerusalem, our blessed Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ, passed by and said, "What aileth thee?" He said, "Lord, my teeth ache." He said, "Arise and follow me, and thy teeth shall never ache any more." Here, healing was narrative. The body listened to scripture, and pain was expected to obey. Pain nailed to wood. Sir Kenelm Digby proposed a remedy less comforting than the others. The patient was instructed to scratch the aching gum with an iron nail until blood was drawn. The nail, now bearing the pain, was then driven into a wooden beam. Once fixed there, the toothache would never return. At least, so said the sage. Pain, in this view, could be removed from the body and imprisoned in wood and iron. Warts and the logic of decay. The cures for warts were nearly endless, but all followed the same logic. Something living, or once living, was rubbed against the skin and then left to rot. As it decayed, so would the affliction. A stolen piece of meat, buried at a crossroads. An apple sliced, rubbed on the warts, and buried. A snail, rubbed on the skin, then impaled on a thorn, and left to die. This was sympathetic magic at its simplest. What happens to the object will happen to the body. The power of red and protective color. Color itself was believed to heal. Rooms hung with red cloth were thought to repel disease, especially smallpox. One physician claimed to have cured a royal child by surrounding him with nothing but red. Even today, red flannel tied around a sore throat survives as a faint echo of this belief. Red was thought hateful to evil spirits. The Romans hung red coral around the necks of infants to protect them from the evil eye, a custom that, remarkably, has never entirely disappeared. Desperation, ritual, and the hidden diagram. Among the strangest remedies were those meant not for illness, but for loss. For a sick child, some were said to crawl through a hole in the ground and seal it behind them with thorns. For diseased cattle, fires were lit on Midsummer's Day, holy water poured into their mouths, and psalms sung, sacred words layered over older rites. And if something had been stolen, a final instruction was given. A mysterious diagram was to be copied and placed beneath the left heel, inside the shoe. Then, it was promised, news of the stolen thing would soon come. Truth, apparently, could be pressed out by weight. These cures may seem foolish to us now. But in a world without medicine as we know it, belief was not ignorance, it was survival. Transferring diseases. When illness could be given away. The idea that pain could move. For centuries, it was widely believed that disease was not fixed within the body. It could be moved. It could be handed over. This belief was ancient, and it appeared wherever fear and imagination were stronger than anatomy. Pliny records that pains of the stomach could be transferred into another living being, a duck or even a small puppy. The suffering would leave the human body and find a new host. Illness, in this view, was not a condition. It was a burden, and burdens could be passed on. The crossroads trapped. Around 200 years ago, a curious prescription for convulsions was still being taken seriously. The healer instructed that clippings of the patient's fingernails, hairs plucked from the eyebrows, and a halfpenny should be gathered together. These were to be wrapped in a cloth that had been worn around the patient's head. The bundle was then placed at a gateway where 4 roads met. Whoever opened it first would take the sickness. The patient, relieved of the burden, would recover, while the unsuspecting stranger inherited the disease. This practice was not merely folklore. In 1695, a man named John Dougal was formally prosecuted in Edinburgh for prescribing it. Giving disease to the dead. Some methods were darker, but, in the minds of their practitioners, more just. Why pass disease to the living when the dead could bear it without complaint? One such remedy, recorded in folk medicine, concerned the treatment of boils. The boil was poulticed carefully for 3 days and 3 nights. Then the used poultices and cloths were gathered. These were placed inside a coffin with a corpse. Buried together, it was believed that the disease would pass permanently into the dead body and never return. The living, at least, would be spared. Warts and the unwilling stranger. In Lancashire, the same logic applied to warts. Each wart was rubbed with a piece of cinder, a fragment of fire made solid. The cinder was then wrapped in paper and left where 4 roads crossed. Once again, the rule was simple. Whoever opened the parcel would take the affliction. The warts would leave their former owner and reappear on the hands of another, carried unknowingly away. Healing, in this world, often depended on chance and someone else's misfortune. A dog and a child's cough. In Devonshire, the transfer of illness was gentler, and yet just as strange. A child suffering from whooping cough would have a single hair taken from their head. This hair was placed between slices of bread and butter. The sandwich was then given to a dog. If the dog began to cough, as dogs often do, the disease was believed to have passed from child to animal. The child would heal. The cough had found a new home. These rituals were not born of cruelty, but of fear and hope in a world without cures. If illness could be moved, then perhaps it could be escaped. Witches' powers. Cruel arts and narrow limits. The Confession of Agnes Simpson, 1590. The powers attributed to witches were believed to be vast, and yet strangely limited. They could not strike at will. They required objects, symbols, contact. When Agnes Simpson was tried in Scotland in the year 1590, she confessed under examination to a plot against the life of King James VI. Her method was not poison in the ordinary sense. She stated that she had hung a black toad for 9 days, allowing the corrupt juices to drip slowly from its body. This venom, carefully collected, was believed to contain concentrated malice. Had she obtained a piece of linen worn by the king, even a fragment of his clothing, she claimed she could have killed him simply by applying the venom to it. The suffering, she said, would have been unbearable. It would have felt as though the king were lying naked upon sharp thorns and needles, pierced again and again by invisible torment. The power of contact. What mattered most in witchcraft was not strength, but proximity. A lock of hair. A shred of cloth. Something once touched by the victim. Without such a link, the spell could not complete itself. This belief reveals the strange logic of magical thinking. The body could be reached through what it had touched, worn, or shed. Distance alone was protection. Wax and clay effigies. Another method of inflicting pain required no poison at all. Witches were believed to shape a small figure, an effigy, made of wax or clay, fashioned carefully in the likeness of their victim. Once completed, the figure became a substitute body. Pins driven into it would pierce flesh elsewhere. Blows struck against it would echo as pain in distant limbs. The body, in this belief, could be injured through its shadow. By stabbing, burning, or beating the image, the witch could torment the living person it represented, even bring about sickness or death. Witchcraft did not imagine unlimited power. It imagined power bound by symbols, objects, and belief. To touch was to harm. To shape was to control. You have been listening to Magic and Medicine from Chronicles of Pharmacy. If you enjoy these calm journeys through forgotten knowledge, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps this quiet work continue. More stories of ancient wisdom, lost books, and the strange paths of human belief await you here. Until next time, rest well and travel safely.